Welcome to episode 1 of Linguabees, the podcast. In this episode, we will introduce you to the team behind the podcast and have a short discussion to introduce this project as part of the Maestría en Lingüística Aplicada en Enseñanza del Inglés from the University of Guanajuato. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. This is Ana Karen Ocampo Marquez, but you can call me Karen. I've been an English teacher for 5 years now. I've taught to elementary school, middle school, high school, and college students. But what I love the most about applied linguistics is the study of the relationship between language, society, and social justice. But we will discuss that in another time. I am so happy because I will be hosting today's episode alongside Carlos.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Karen. I'm Carlos Silva Reyes, and it's exciting to be here in the first episode of the Linguabees podcast, where we'll be talking about different topics concerning the field of linguistics. So, as Karen mentioned, we are part of the 8th generation here at the Universidad de Guanajuato and the master's program of Maestría en Lingüística Aplicada a la Enseñanza de Inglés, which is basically applied linguistics to English teaching. So let's get to know everyone. I'll start. My name is Carlos Silva Reyes. As I mentioned, I'm from Hermosillo, Sonora originally. I graduated from the Universidad de Sonora. I've taught kids 10 and up, teenagers, adults, many different levels. And I enjoy very much seeing people learn. I also enjoy learning new things. And now I would say I'm more interested in investigating and finding out how we can learn languages more efficiently and seeing how language actually impacts society. So let's get to know everyone else, starting with Alex.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Alex. I did a BA in neurological physical therapy at the UNAM. And I know that you might think that what is he doing here? But actually, we are pretty much related, my BA with this master's program. And we will see it later on. But I am interested in psycholinguistics and diversity within the EFL field. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dulce Nayeli de Anda Vargas, and I'm so excited to be here as well. I did a BA on English language teaching at the University of Guanajuato. I am an English teacher and also a student of this master's program. And I'm so interested on the process of the language learning. And now I will introduce Natalia.
Well, as Dulce said, I am Natalia Carolina Gonzalez Marentes. Hello, everyone. I am also a student in the master's program of Applied Linguistics, and I studied a BA in English language teaching, at Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes. I am from Aguascalientes, and I'm currently studying in Guanajuato. The field that I would like to focus on in applied linguistics is English medium as instruction. And I think that's it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alondra Juárez Hernández. I come from San Luis de la Paz, Guanajuato. I hold a BA in English language teaching by the University of Guanajuato, and I'm interested in applied linguistics because I want to be able to help my students, because the most I learn, the more I can share with my students. And I also want to improve my skills as a researcher, which is why I am enrolled in this master's program. So I'm glad to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marta Patricia, but you can call me Patty. And I have a degree in pedagogy. I'm from Guanajuato. I have lived here all of my life in the state of Guanajuato. And I was an English teacher for 6 years. and I work with young learners. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Linguabees podcast. My name is Claudia Ingrid Perez Maldonado. I am from Querétaro City, actually, and I am also studying the MA program with a classmate at the Universidad of Guanajuato. I graduated from Universidad Autónoma de Querétaro, and well, it's my pleasure to be here. Something that I really like and enjoy is teaching, which is just a branch from the whole field of applied linguistics. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It is a pleasure to have the Linguabees team all together today. To start off our conversation, let's talk about what are the most common questions you've been asked when you tell people that you are in Applied Linguistics MA. What do you think about this?
Well, for example, my experience, ever since I shared with my family that I wanted to apply for this program, my mom asked me, what is that? What is applied linguistics? She said that it sounded like a very academic word and a very professional thing, but she had no idea what it was about. And I think the same thing happens every time I share the name of the program that I am studying applied linguistics. People keep asking, what does applied linguistics mean?
I would say that usually when you hear the word linguistics, I think people think of language, but as we'll see later on, it's much more than that. So usually when people hear, applied linguistics, they ask, what does it mean? So according to the Association for Applied Linguistics, which is the leading professional organization in the field, they define it as an interdisciplinary field of research and practice dealing with practical problems of language and communication, according to Groom and Littlemore.
We have this other definition by the Applied Linguistics Journal that defines a subject as, and I quote, the study of language and linguistics in relation to practical problems. And another well-known definition is the following by the eminent applied linguist Chris Brumfitt, that defines the field as a theoretical and empirical investigation of real-world problems in which language is a central issue. What do you all think about these definitions? Do you think that everything is clear?
Well, my first questions about this definition would be like, hey, how can we define what are practical problems of language or communication? Of course, for example, for a language teacher, it can be related to the classroom, doing plans, understanding the use of language of their students. But for example, how people use language in social media is another that comes to my mind. Then what about real world? I mean, what is a real world? How can we define this? A person might identify a problem that maybe for other it is not considered a problem. It's another problematic situation with this definition.
As we can see, applied linguistics not only applies to the learning of language in the classroom, but how language is used. And of course, we all know that we use language for everything. So you can say that applied linguistics is everywhere. So one of the reasons why applied linguistics can be difficult to define is that it's relatively a young field, and the date and definition of how it started is kind of blurry. So, for example, we have a definition from Vivian Cook saying that basically what I mentioned, applied linguistics means many things to many people. So being that we see it everywhere, it can mean a lot of different things, right? So what about everyone else? What do you think of the beginning of the field and how it all started?
Well, actually, there is a book by Pat. It is called A History of Applied Linguistics from 1980 to the present. And, well, it was published in 2015, I think. And that explains that one possible beginning of the applied linguistics field could be traced in the first half of the 20th century in the United States, when teachers started to apply those behaviorist principles in the classroom. Remember the prize and reward theory?
Thank you, Claudia. Half of the 20th century is not so far, which helps us to see how relatively young the field is, as my colleague Carlos said. This can explain why it is so hard to define a subject that has a really short history. Another reason why this is difficult to define, it is associated with the central issue of applied linguistics, which is language. How can we define the limits of this field if language is everywhere? In fact, Davies in 2005 wrote that because language is everywhere, applied linguistics is the science of everything. What do you all think about this really powerful quote?
Well, actually, it is complicated to define what the scope of applied linguistics is because it is not related to the fact that it's only for English language teaching, for example, or only for a specific situation related to language disorder. I mean, it goes beyond those words. And what is important to notice is that it will help people to solve some real world problem communication, okay? And to engage with language and with other situations, I mean, within and later, and leaving behind the fact that it is not only for a specific field. It will be what it shows us the huge scope applied linguistics is related to.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for that contribution. And yes, it is a very wide and broad perspective. And that's exactly what Corder stated in 1973, which, like I was saying, I personally think that applied linguistics started to really become recognized around that time in the 1970s. So he stated that if we're going to talk about language teaching, we have to include things like speech therapy, translation, and language planning. So they kind of make sense if we had to include those different topics. And according to Davies in 2005, he also wrote that most of the entries in the glossary for applied linguistics have to do with language teaching. So, what do you know about this,
Yes,
Natalia?
thank you, Carlos. I was also going to mention Davies. Yeah, that in the 60s or 70s, he considers that, well, everyone considered that applied linguistics was completely related to only language teaching, and that it was centered in language teaching. And because of this, after the Second World War, they started to notice that most teachers or teacher trainers, service teachers, etc., had a really lack of knowledge about language itself. So they decided to use applied linguistics to fill this gap, like this need of knowing about the language. So they decided to use linguistics for that.
Yeah, and this discovery about language teachers also affected the way teachers were prepared to be teachers, especially language teachers. So they started to realize that it was not enough to be able to speak the language. So, for example, Davis 2005 mentioned that teachers no longer needed post-experience knowledge of the language. So linguistics had become mainstream. This means that teachers could now study to be language teachers without prior experience.
And also, well, I remember that because in this stage, teachers were needed to study before entering the profession. There was also like this explosion of applied linguistics training, which included methodology, institutional language use. And most of all, this author, Davies, explains that applied linguistics played an important role in leveling, especially methodology concepts. For example, the grammar translation method, the autolingual method, the structural approach, and so on. And so we can see that at the same time that English language teaching field was evolving, the applied linguistics field was evolving as well. So we can see that they had a really close relationship.
Thank you all. And this is so true. This is related to how Davies also mentioned that the reason why applied linguistics continues to be closely associated with language teaching is how, and I quote, many of those who studied applied linguistics have been and will continue to be involved at some level in language teaching, which is, after all, the largest profession involved in language studies. What do you think about this? How can you see this in, for example, our group?
Well, for example, in our group, most of us are language teachers or have had a previous experience in language teaching. I think most of the people here in this podcast have like graduated as language teachers. However, we have some exceptions like you, Ana Karen, and also Alex, who have had some teaching experience, but it's not maybe your major itself, but are still studying applied linguistics, right? So I think that even though we all think that applied linguistics is like really close to language teaching, it can also like vary in many other fields. Alex, can you please tell us what your major is in? And then Ana Karen?
Yeah, actually, I hold a BA in neurological physical therapy.
Yes, and I didn't mention it before, but I studied industrial design. Anyway, I believe that there are different tools about my major that can be helpful for applied linguistics. For example, design thinking. So if you allow me to continue, one important aspect about applied linguistics is that it is an interdisciplinary field, in fact. That means it's not only linguistics or language teaching. Of course, linguistics plays an important role in applied linguistics, but by no means the only role, as Davies once claimed in 2005. Then, applied linguistics must also draw on psychology, sociology, education measurement theory, and so on and so forth. And we have seen it, in fact, in numerous situations where nowadays problems require more than just one subject to provide solutions. Davies suggests that linguists like you, colleagues, and me should look to other fields for relevant insights into real-world language problems as well, like to biology, cultural studies, economics, education, philosophy, politics, psychology, and more and more and more. Do you all have an example of this?
Actually, I like how you mention it, and each and every single one of our BAs could be really helpful if we know how to pave the way for conducting these previous studies that we had with within the applied linguistics field. And it is important to realize that in the real world language problems, as you said, Karen, it is pretty amazing how applied linguistics could be involved and related in other fields, in other scientific fields, as biology, as physiology, for example, psychology, philosophy, and later on, it could be related also with economics, politics, and that's how we realize and how we acknowledge the importance of applied linguistics.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, we can see nowadays that applied linguistics is expanding to areas other than just language teaching. So, it's easy to think of linguistics and applied linguistics as one of the same. And although they are very similar, we have to differentiate applied linguistics from the field of linguistics. To quote Davies, applied linguistics is not a branch of linguistics or of any other academic discipline for that matter. It is an academic subject area in its own right, with its own set of concerns, its own academic journals, its own professional associations, its own academic qualification, and its own professional pathways.
Yes, thank you, Carlos. It is true, applied linguistics is defining its scope and limits, and we are not the only ones saying this. In fact, Clarence Cranch sees the future of this field strongly engaged in this struggle between gaining the technical recognition of institutional and corporate sponsors by striving to improve the practice on one hand, and on the other, gaining symbolic scholarly legitimacy by refining the theory. Applied linguistics is still fighting to defy its place as an academic subject area on its own. And we can surely see how it is diverging in some way from language teaching. However, it's not disassociating completely. Still, we have more to talk about on the topic of applied linguistics, how they are thought to be equal to language teachers, which will be the topic of our next episode, where we will have a very special guest with us. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned and we'll be back soon with another episode of your podcast Linguabees, because applied linguistics is for everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
This podcast is part of the Applied Linguistics Master's Program from the University of Guanajuato in Mexico. This episode was produced by Patricia Linares Flores. Carlos Silva Rayas and Ana Karen Ocampo Marquez are the co-hosts.
It was edited by Claudia Ingrid Perez Maldonado and Dulce Anayeli de Anda Vargas. The script was written by Alondra Juarez Hernandez, and the social media managers are Natalia Carolina Gonzalez Marentes and Alejandro Aguilar Arriaga.